In a luxury mansion, a pregnant woman tastes something metallic during Thanksgiving dinner. A former FBI agent, she recognizes the invisible sign. Someone is trying to poison her. Alone, she begins an investigation that uncovers a cruel plot hidden behind smiles. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now, on with the story. The Vanderbilt townhouse rose imposingly in the most exclusive neighborhood of New York City, right in the heart of the Upper East Side, where each building silently vied for the attention of passers-by on the tree-lined streets. It was one of those properties featured in architectural magazines, with gardens designed by award-winning landscape architects, a pool that looked more like a work of art, and immense windows revealing imported crystal chandeliers. To an outsider, that home represented the pinnacle of success, the materialization of the dreams of anyone who worked their entire life in search of stability and recognition. But Chloe Miller, at 33 years old and 7 months pregnant, had already learned that appearances didn't always match the reality hidden behind locked doors and rehearsed smiles. She sat before her closet mirror, observing her reflection as she adjusted the navy blue silk dress that now molded to the curve of her belly. Her brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her dark eyes seemed to carry a mix of exhaustion and determination that hadn't existed a few months ago. Chloe never imagined she would be here in this house, in this life. Coming from a middle-class family in rural Ohio, she had grown up among books and conversations about justice, influenced by her father, a police chief, and her mother, a teacher. From a young age, she knew she wanted to work in investigations, and after graduating with a law degree, she applied to the FBI. Years of absolute dedication followed: complex cases, risky undercover operations, sleepless nights chasing criminals who thought they were untouchable. She had a special talent for identifying patterns where others saw only coincidences, for noticing details that went overlooked, for sniffing out danger before it materialized. It was during an intelligence operation in New York that she met Ethan Vanderbilt. He was a businessman, heir to a fortune built over generations in real estate and investments. Tall, with the quiet charm of men who didn't need to prove anything to anyone, Ethan had a gift for making anyone feel special when he spoke to them. Chloe was investigating a money laundering ring involving several of the city's construction firms, and Ethan ended up being a key witness, cooperating fully with the authorities. They met a few times during his depositions, and Chloe realized he wasn't just another wealthy businessman trying to protect his interests. There was something genuine about him, a real concern for doing the right thing. When the case was closed and Ethan was cleared of any involvement, he asked her to dinner. Chloe hesitated but accepted. One dinner turned into several, and several turned into an intense romance that culminated in a wedding surrounded by the expectations and commentary of New York's high society. At first, Chloe felt out of place in that universe of charity galas, formal dinners, and conversations about investments and international travel. But Ethan was always by her side, introducing her as the most intelligent and courageous woman he had ever met, and that made her feel she belonged there as much as anyone else. When they discovered she was pregnant, their happiness was genuine. Ethan had wanted to be a father for years, and Chloe, who had always prioritized her career, realized this was the right time to build a family. She took an early maternity leave, determined to enjoy these final months of pregnancy in peace, preparing the nursery, reading about motherhood, and trying to adapt to the slower-paced life now demanded. But it was precisely during this pause, this moment when she was supposed to be relaxing, that Chloe began to notice things that didn't make sense. Small things, too subtle to be obvious, but disturbing enough to set off an alarm in her trained, suspicious mind. And it all began to take shape on Thanksgiving Day, when the family gathered for the traditional dinner that Ethan insisted on hosting every year, because he loved the idea of bringing the people he loved together around a bountiful table. The dining room was impeccable that November evening. The solid wood table, capable of seating 20, was covered with a white linen tablecloth and decorated with autumnal flower arrangements in shades of orange and red. The crystal glasses reflected the candlelight, and the smell of roasted turkey mixed with the aroma of cinnamon and mulled wine wafting from the kitchen. Ethan's brother, Mark, was there with his wife, Rachel, along with Ethan's parents, some distant cousins, and, of course, Claire Sterling. Claire had been a constant presence in the Vanderbilts' lives for several years. She presented herself as an old family friend, someone who had known Ethan since they were teenagers and had always been around for important moments. She was a beautiful woman, with delicate features, impeccably styled blonde hair, and a helpful demeanor that won everyone over. Around 35, she worked as an image consultant and split her time between New York and Miami, organizing events for the elite. Since Chloe had joined the family, Claire had always been kind, helpful, offering to help with the house decor, giving tips on the best places to shop, and bringing special treats she claimed to have prepared personally with the pregnant woman in mind. Chloe had always found the friendship a bit excessive, but she saw no reason to be suspicious. Ethan said Claire was like a sister, that she had always been there during the family's tough times, and it was natural for her to remain close. What Chloe didn't know and would only discover later was that Claire wasn't just a friend. She had been Ethan's girlfriend years ago, a relationship that ended when he decided to focus more on his career and she left for Europe in search of new opportunities. When Claire returned to the States, Ethan was already married to his first wife, a marriage that lasted only 3 years and ended in a quiet divorce no one liked to talk about. During that period, Claire was always nearby, offering support, organizing dinners, being the confidant Ethan said he needed. That Thanksgiving night, Claire was radiant in an emerald green dress that highlighted her light eyes. She had helped organize the dinner, overseeing every detail with the intimacy of someone who knew the house as well as its owners. Chloe watched everything from her seat at the table, next to Ethan, feeling the baby move inside her and trying to appear cheerful despite the fatigue she had been feeling for the past few weeks. The dinner proceeded with light conversation, laughter, and toasts, with grape juice for Chloe, since alcohol was off limits during her pregnancy. Claire personally served each dish, making sure to put generous portions on Chloe's plate and insisting she try the special cranberry sauce she had prepared just for the mom-to-be, using a recipe she claimed was perfect for pregnant women. Chloe thanked her, and as she brought the first spoonful to her mouth, she noticed something strange. The taste wasn't right. There was a subtle bitterness, almost imperceptible to a less attentive person, but for her it was unmistakable. Her palate, trained over years in field operations where she had to identify suspicious substances in drinks and food, immediately picked up on that metallic, slightly acidic flavor that shouldn't have been there. She paused, the spoon still in her mouth, and felt her heart race. She glanced around discreetly. No one else seemed to notice anything. Ethan was chatting animatedly with his brother about a new real estate project. His mother was complimenting the decor. Claire was smiling from the other side of the table, watching Chloe with that same helpful expression. Chloe swallowed with difficulty and took a sip of water. She tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a combination of spices that her sensitive, pregnant palate didn't appreciate. Maybe she was overreacting, letting anxiety get the best of her. But something inside her, that investigator's instinct that had kept her alive in dangerous situations, screamed that something was wrong. She looked at Claire again and, for a split second, caught a different glint in those light eyes. It wasn't concern. It was expectation. Chloe didn't eat any more of the sauce. She discreetly spent the rest of the meal pushing food around her plate, pretending to be full, politely refusing when Claire offered more. For the rest of the night, she observed every movement, every word, every glance. She noticed that Claire touched Ethan's arm with an intimacy that went beyond friendship. She noted how well Claire knew every corner of the house, how she moved through the kitchen without needing to ask where things were, how she seemed more at ease there than Chloe herself. When the guests left and she could finally retreat to her room, Chloe locked the bathroom door and looked at herself in the mirror. She was pale, her hands trembling. Was she going crazy? Was the pregnancy messing with her head so much that it was making her see threats where there were none? But then she remembered the past few months, the unexplained dizzy spells she'd been having, the constant weakness that doctors attributed to the pregnancy, the nausea that didn't seem to go away even after the first trimester. the headaches that appeared out of nowhere. And always, always, right after consuming something Claire had brought or prepared. Chloe sat on the edge of the bathtub, her hand on her belly, feeling her son's movements. She needed to be sure. She couldn't accuse anyone without proof, especially someone Ethan considered practically family. But she also couldn't ignore what she had just felt. She went back to the bedroom and picked up her phone. She called Vera, her former FBI partner, one of the few people she trusted completely. Vera answered on the third ring, her voice still sleepy. It was almost midnight. Chloe apologized for the late hour, but said she needed to talk urgently. She recounted what had happened at dinner, trying to sound rational, trying not to seem paranoid. Vera listened in silence and then sighed. "Look, Chloe, I know you're not one to freak out for no reason. If your gut is telling you something's wrong, it probably is. But you need concrete proof before you make any accusations, especially since this woman seems to have the complete trust of your husband and his family. What you need now is to gather evidence without raising suspicion." Chloe agreed. That was exactly what she was thinking. She spent the night awake, mentally devising a plan. The next morning, after Ethan left for the office, she returned to the dining room. The staff was still clearing away the remnants of last night's party. Chloe asked them to save the leftover cranberry sauce, claiming she wanted the recipe to make at home later. The housekeeper, a kind older woman named Maria who had worked at the house for years, put the container in the fridge without a second thought. In the following days, Chloe started paying attention to everything. She discreetly noted every time Claire showed up, what she brought, what she said. She observed that the visits were frequent, always with the excuse of bringing something special for the pregnant woman. Homemade cakes, fresh juices, energy smoothies. Everything was always prepared by Claire herself, never store-bought. And Chloe noticed a pattern. Whenever she consumed something from Claire, she felt sick hours later. Dizziness, nausea, an inexplicable weakness that made her need to lie down. She tried to talk to Ethan about her suspicions, but she chose her words carefully. She said she found it strange that Claire came over so often, that maybe it would be better for them to have more privacy in these last few months before the baby arrived. Ethan frowned, surprised. "Claire is just trying to help, Chloe. She's always been a big part of my family's life. I don't understand why it's bothering you now." Chloe insisted, saying she didn't feel comfortable with so many visits, that she needed peace and quiet. Ethan was silent for a moment, then sighed and promised he would talk to Claire, asking her to space out her visits more. Chloe detected a certain irritation in his voice, as if she were being jealous or dramatic. That made her back down. She didn't want to create a conflict without solid proof. That's when Chloe decided to act alone. She took a sample of the cranberry sauce and, using old contacts from the FBI, sent it to a private lab that performed discreet analyses. She knew she couldn't use official channels, as she was on leave and there was no formal investigation open. She would have to do everything on the side, paying out of her own pocket without officially involving anyone. While waiting for the results, Chloe began to investigate Claire's past. She used her research skills, accessed public records, scoured old social media profiles, and spoke discreetly with people who had known the Vanderbilt family for a long time. And that's how she began to find pieces of a puzzle far more sinister than she had imagined. She discovered that Claire didn't just use one name. In different states at different times, she appeared with variations of her identity. Claire Sterling in New York, Claire Brandini in Illinois, Cynthia Sterling in South Carolina. Always the same woman, always involved with wealthy men, always as a family friend, always around when something went wrong. Chloe found records of archived police reports, complaints that never went anywhere, accounts on online forums from women who were suspicious of a certain blonde who had gotten close to their husbands under the pretext of friendship. The more Chloe investigated, the more she realized she wasn't dealing with a simple jealous rival. She was facing someone who had turned manipulation and slow poisoning into a sinister art form, someone who knew exactly how to act without leaving obvious traces, how to always stay in the gray area between suspicion and proof. And the most terrifying part of it all was realizing that she herself, a trained federal agent, was this woman's victim, and had only noticed when it might already be too late. Chloe looked down at her belly again, feeling the baby move. She had to protect him. She had to uncover the whole truth, and she had to do it before it was too late. Because now she was certain. Claire didn't just want Ethan, she wanted Chloe's entire life, and she was willing to destroy it to get it, bit by bit, silently, in a way that could never be proven. At least that's what she thought. But Chloe wasn't just any victim. She was a federal agent. And now that she knew she was being hunted, it was time to turn the tables. The days following Thanksgiving dinner were marked by a silent tension that only Chloe could perceive. The townhouse continued to operate at its usual rhythm, with the staff tending to the gardens, the cleaning, the meals. Ethan carried on with his routine of meetings and business commitments. And Claire, despite the conversation Ethan claimed to have had with her, kept showing up, always with a plausible excuse, always with that polite smile that could disarm any suspicion. Chloe began to write everything down in a notebook she hid in the back of her closet drawer. Dates, times, what Claire brought, how she felt afterward. She also started politely refusing the treats the blonde insisted on bringing, citing nausea or claiming her doctor had recommended a stricter diet. She noticed the poorly disguised annoyance in Claire's eyes each time she refused, but the woman always smiled and said she understood perfectly that pregnancy was delicate and every body reacted differently. It was during one of these visits, on a sunny morning in early December, that Chloe noticed something that made her blood run cold. Claire was in the living room talking to Ethan about a charity event at the end of the year, when she casually mentioned she needed to grab some things from the guest house. Chloe frowned. Guest house? She knew the property had a smaller building at the back of the lot, a sort of cottage that Ethan occasionally used as an office or for guests, but she never knew anyone was living there. Ethan seemed a bit uncomfortable with the comment, but quickly explained that he had offered the guest house to Claire a few months ago when she mentioned she was having problems with the apartment she was renting in Soho. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she sorted things out. Chloe felt her blood boil, but she kept her expression neutral. She waited for Claire to leave and then confronted her husband. "Why didn't you tell me she's living here?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of exhaustion. "She's not living here, Chloe. She's using the guest house temporarily. It's different. And I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be upset, and I didn't want to stress you out with it during the pregnancy. She's a family friend. She was going through a hard time. It was just a gesture of kindness." Chloe needed all her self-control not to explode. A gesture of kindness? This woman is living on our property and you didn't think I should know? Ethan, this isn't normal. This isn't just friendship. There's something very wrong with all of this. Ethan raised his voice for the first time since they'd been married. Wrong? What's wrong is you being paranoid about someone who has never done anything to hurt anyone. Claire has always been there for my family during the tough times. When my father had that health scare, she was one of the only people who genuinely cared. When my first marriage ended, she helped me get through it. She's like family to me, Chloe, and I'm not going to turn my back on her just because you're jealous. The word hung in the air, like an accusation. Jealous. That's how Ethan interpreted her concerns. Chloe felt tears burn her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. This wasn't the time to cry. It was time to prove she wasn't crazy. It's not jealousy, Ethan. It's instinct. And if you don't want to listen to me, fine. But don't ask me to pretend everything is normal because it's not. She left the room before he could answer, went up to their bedroom and locked the door. She sat on the bed, her hand trembling as she picked up her phone. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone. She called Vera again, but this time she asked to meet in person. They arranged to meet at a discreet coffee shop in the West Village, far from the places Chloe usually frequented with Ethan. Vera arrived with a folder under her arm, sunglasses covering part of her face even inside the shop. She was a woman in her early 40s, with black hair tied in a low bun and the posture of someone who had spent her life dealing with tense situations. She had been Chloe's mentor in her early years at the FBI and was still one of the most respected investigators in the Bureau. "I got some information on your friend," Vera said, opening the folder and showing photos and printed documents. "And you were right to be suspicious. This woman has a questionable history, to say the least." Chloe leaned over the table, her eyes quickly scanning the information. There were records of Claire in at least 4 different states, always under variations of the same name. In Chicago, she had been engaged to a tech entrepreneur who called off the wedding at the last minute, claiming his fiancée had strange behaviors that made him uncomfortable. Months after the breakup, the man married another woman who quickly became pregnant. The child was born prematurely with health problems that doctors could never fully explain. The mother spent months in the hospital, and Claire, who supposedly no longer had contact with her ex-fiancé, showed up at the hospital several times offering help and bringing homemade food. In Charleston, Claire worked as an image consultant for a traditional family. The family matriarch, a 70-year-old woman, fell mysteriously ill after entrusting Claire with the organization of a large birthday party. Doctors suspected she had ingested something, but they could never identify the substance. Claire left town shortly after, claiming she had received a better offer in Miami. In Miami, things got even darker. Claire became involved with a wealthy widower who owned a hotel chain. The man had a daughter from his first marriage, a 25-year-old who was immediately suspicious of Claire's intentions. The young woman began to investigate on her own and gathered evidence that Claire was manipulating her father, isolating him from friends and family. Before she could present her findings, the young woman collapsed during a family dinner and had to be rushed to the hospital. Claire, who had personally prepared the meal, was inconsolable, but she also left Miami a short time later, saying she couldn't stay in a city with so many sad memories. There were never any convictions because she's extremely careful, Vera explained, taking off her glasses and looking at Chloe seriously. She uses substances that are hard to detect in standard tests, dosages that cause symptoms but don't kill immediately. It's slow, progressive poisoning, and she always has a convincing story, always seems to be the most helpful and concerned person in the world. But look at the pattern. She gets close to wealthy men, usually with complicated past relationships, offers emotional support and makes herself indispensable. And when something or someone threatens her position, that person starts having unexplained health problems. Chloe felt her stomach churn as she absorbed the information. And the lab results, did you get anything? Vera paused before answering. The sample you sent had traces of compounds that shouldn't be in cranberry sauce. Nothing that would kill you outright, but substances that, if consumed regularly during pregnancy, could cause serious harm. I'm talking about miscarriages, fetal development problems, complications that would easily be attributed to natural causes. Chloe, you need to get away from this woman, and you need to convince your husband of the truth. But how? He doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm jealous, that the pregnancy is making me paranoid. Then you need more proof, and you need allies. Someone in his family who can confirm your suspicions or who has already noticed something strange. Chloe immediately thought of Rachel, Ethan's brother's wife. Mark and Rachel had been married for 8 years, but had no children. Chloe had always found that a bit odd as she noticed how lovingly Rachel looked at children at family parties, how her eyes lit up whenever someone announced a pregnancy. But she had never asked directly, respecting the couple's privacy. What if Rachel had something to say? What if she had also been a victim of Claire? Chloe thanked Vera for the information and promised to stay in touch. On the way home, her mind was racing. She needed to talk to Rachel, but she couldn't do it directly or in front of other people. She needed an opportunity where they could be alone, where Rachel would feel safe to talk. The opportunity came a few days later when Rachel called to invite Chloe to lunch. She said she wanted to have some girl talk, that she missed having a family member to confide in. Chloe accepted immediately, and they arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant in Soho, far from the townhouse and prying ears. Rachel arrived on time, as always. She was a woman of understated beauty, with light brown hair tied in a ponytail and elegant but not flashy clothes. She was 36 and worked as an architect, but in recent years she had cut back on projects to focus more on her personal life. They ordered their food, and for the first few minutes they made small talk. But Chloe could see that Rachel was tense, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how to begin. That's when Chloe decided to take the first step. "Rachel, can I ask you a personal question? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Rachel nodded, her fingers nervously playing with her napkin. Of course, Chloe. Ask away. Have you and Mark ever tried to have children? Rachel's face fell instantly, and Chloe saw tears welling up in her sister-in-law's eyes. She had hit a raw nerve. Rachel took a deep breath before answering, her voice trembling. We tried, for years. We did treatments, saw the best doctors. But 7 years ago, something happened that changed everything. Chloe leaned forward, her heart pounding. What happened, Rachel? Her sister-in-law looked around, making sure no one was listening, and then began her story. I was pregnant, 12 weeks along. No one knew yet. We wanted to wait until after the first trimester to tell the family, but someone found out. Claire. Chloe felt a chill run down her spine. Go on. Please? Rachel wiped away the tears that were starting to fall. She showed up at our house one day, saying she'd heard Mark mention something to Ethan and that she was so happy for us. She brought a bunch of things. Special teas for pregnant women, homemade cookies, vitamins she said were great for strength. I thought it was so kind, I accepted everything. I started drinking the teas daily, eating the cookies. Claire came by all the time, bringing more things, saying she wanted to help because she knew how hard pregnancy could be. Chloe could barely breathe. And what happened? Rachel sobbed. After 2 weeks of drinking those teas, I started to feel strange. Dizziness, weakness, nausea that was much worse than normal. I went to the doctor several times, but they said it was common, that every pregnancy is different. Until one night I woke up with horrible cramps. Mark rushed me to the hospital. I lost the baby, Chloe, and the doctors could never explain exactly why. They said these things just happen sometimes, that it was nature, but I knew it wasn't normal. My body was rejecting something. Did you suspect the teas? Rachel nodded. I threw everything out afterward, but I kept a mug I had used. I never washed it. I kept it because something inside me told me I might need it one day. It's been in my kitchen cabinet for 7 years. I've never told anyone this, not even Mark. He would have thought I was crazy. Chloe squeezed Rachel's hand tightly. You're not crazy, and neither am I. Claire is doing the same thing to me, trying to poison me slowly, making it seem like they're just normal pregnancy symptoms. Rachel's eyes widened, her expression a mix of shock and relief. She finally had someone who believed her, someone who understood. So it wasn't just my imagination? She really did that? She did. And from what I've found, we're not the only ones. She has a history of doing this to other women, in other cities. Always the same tactics, always the same outcome. The two sat in silence for a moment, processing the gravity of the revelation. It was Chloe who broke the silence. Rachel, I need your help. I need to have that mug analyzed to see if there are still traces of what you drank, and I need you to help me prove to Ethan and Mark that this woman is not who they think she is. Rachel nodded with determination, wiping away her last tears. You can count on me. I won't let her do to you what she did to me. I won't let another woman lose a child because of her. They agreed that Rachel would bring the mug to Chloe the next day, discreetly. Chloe would contact Vera again to get it analyzed. They also decided to start documenting everything, every visit from Claire, everything she brought, every symptom that appeared afterward. They needed to build a solid case, a timeline that would prove the pattern of behavior. When Chloe returned home that afternoon, she felt for the first time in weeks that she wasn't alone in this fight. She had an ally, someone who knew exactly what she was going through. And together they were going to expose Claire for who she really was. But Chloe didn't expect things to get even more complicated, because Claire, as clever as she had always been, was starting to suspect she was being investigated. And when a woman accustomed to being in control realizes she's losing it, she becomes even more dangerous. The following week, Claire drastically increased the frequency of her visits. She appeared every day, always with some excuse. She brought newspapers for Ethan, flowers to decorate the house, offered to help with the nursery preparations. And always she tried to leave something for Chloe to consume. A fresh juice, a piece of cake, a jar of homemade jam. Chloe refused everything, but she could feel the tension growing in Claire's eyes. Ethan also began to grow more distant. The arguments about Claire had created a barrier between them, and Chloe felt Their marriage was being tested in a way she had never imagined. He spent more time at the office, came home late, and seemed to avoid deep conversations. And Claire, ever watchful, took advantage of these moments of fragility to get even closer to him, offering that supportive shoulder he seemed to need so much. It was on a particularly tense evening, when Ethan came home visibly stressed from work problems, that Chloe realized just how far Claire's manipulation had gone. He walked into the kitchen, and Chloe saw a covered plate on the counter with a note. It was in Claire's handwriting. The note said she had made Ethan's favorite dessert and left it for him when he got home, that she knew how tired he'd been and that he deserved something special. Chloe watched Ethan pick up the plate and uncover it. It was a slice of key lime pie, seemingly innocent, with that white topping gleaming under the kitchen lights. He picked up a fork and was about to take the first bite when Chloe, driven by an impulse, snatched the plate from his hand. "Don't eat that." Ethan looked at her in disbelief. "Chloe, now you're going too far. I'm not going to stop eating a pie just because you don't like Claire. It's not about liking her or not. It's about protecting you. Please, Ethan, trust me." But it was too late. The argument was already starting, and Ethan, tired and irritated, took the plate back and ate a large bite, almost as an act of defiance. "See? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a pie." Chloe felt tears burn her eyes but said nothing more. She went up to their room and waited. If her suspicions were correct, if that pie contained what she thought it did, Ethan would soon find out firsthand that she wasn't exaggerating, and she prayed the dose wasn't too strong, that it wouldn't cause permanent damage. Because as much as she was hurt by his lack of trust, she still loved him, and she didn't want to see him suffer. 3 hours later, Ethan's screams woke the entire house. Chloe ran downstairs and found him in the bathroom, pale, sweating, and clutching his stomach in severe pain. She called an ambulance immediately. At the hospital, after a battery of tests, the doctors confirmed he had ingested something that had caused the reaction. They couldn't identify the exact substance, but it was clear it wasn't just a common case of food poisoning. Ethan, still on the hospital gurney, looked at Chloe with a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's happening?" Chloe held his hand, her voice firm despite her tears. "Now you're going to listen to me. You're going to listen to everything, and you're going to believe me, because that pie wasn't for you. It was for me, and if I had eaten it, I might not be here to tell you about it." The hospital room was bathed in the soft light filtering through the window, illuminating Ethan's pale face as he lay in bed, connected to IV drips and monitors that beeped in a steady rhythm. Chloe sat beside him, holding his hand, the exhaustion of a sleepless night etched on her features. But there was something different in her eyes now. It was no longer the anguish of someone who wasn't being heard. It was the firmness of someone who finally had the attention she needed to tell the whole truth. Ethan turned his head slowly to look at her, still processing what had happened. The doctors had managed to stabilize him, but the hours following his collapse had been terrifying. He had felt a pain he had never experienced before, a sensation that his body was being attacked from within, as if every organ were rejecting an invader. And now, for the first time since Chloe had started voicing her suspicions, he was ready to listen. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice still hoarse but determined. "From the beginning. Everything you found out about Claire." Chloe took a deep breath and began her story. She told him about Thanksgiving dinner, the strange taste of the sauce, and how her FBI training had taught her to identify when something was wrong. She spoke of the dizzy spells, the persistent nausea, the symptoms that always appeared after she consumed something prepared by Claire. She recounted the research she had done, the woman's history in different states, the victims she had left in her wake. She showed him photos on her phone, documents Vera had obtained, evidence of a pattern that had been repeating for years. Ethan listened in silence, his expression gradually shifting from surprise to horror as he absorbed every piece of information. When Chloe told him about Rachel, about the miscarriage 7 years ago, he squeezed his eyes shut as if to block out the painful reality. "My God," he whispered, "I was so blind, so completely blind. How could I not have seen it? Chloe squeezed his hand tighter. She's very good at what she does, Ethan. She spends years building trust, making herself indispensable. You had no way of knowing. No one did. That's why she always got away with it. Because she plays on people's emotions, on their need to believe that the world is good, that people are sincere. But I should have believed you, Ethan said, turning to face her, his eyes welling up. You're my wife, you're carrying our child, and I called you paranoid, jealous. I dismissed you, as if your concerns meant nothing. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. Chloe let her own tears fall. For weeks she had carried this weight alone, feeling isolated, questioning her own sanity. Hearing those words from Ethan was like breathing again after holding her breath for so long. Now we need to act, she said, drying her tears and adopting the investigator's posture she had always had. We have to gather more evidence, build a solid case. I already have the lab results for the cranberry sauce. Vera is helping me with the field investigation. And Rachel gave me the mug she saved for 7 years, which probably has traces of the tea Claire used to make for her. But we need something more recent, something that directly connects Claire to what happened to you yesterday. The pie, Ethan said promptly. They saved what was left for analysis when I was admitted. The doctors thought the symptoms were strange and asked to preserve everything. Chloe felt a wave of relief. It was the missing piece. Perfect. I'll talk to the doctors and Vera to make sure the analysis is done correctly and the results are officially documented. We also need to review the security camera footage from the house. If Claire went into the kitchen to leave that pie, the cameras will show it. Ethan nodded, but there was a look of pain that went beyond the physical. And my first marriage, Chloe. Do you think she had something to do with it ending? Chloe hesitated before answering. She wasn't sure, but the pieces were starting to fit. His first wife, Julia, had left the townhouse abruptly, citing health problems that prevented her from keeping up with the intense social life Ethan led. At the time, everyone thought she had simply grown tired of that lifestyle. But what if it had been something more sinister? We need to talk to her, Chloe said. We need to know if Julia was also a victim of Claire's. Ethan picked up his phone, hesitated for a moment, then dialed. He and Julia hadn't spoken in years. Not since the divorce. The conversation would be delicate. When she answered, the surprise was evident in her voice. Ethan got straight to the point, explained what was happening, and asked if she remembered Claire being very present during their marriage, if she had felt anything strange back then. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Julia began to speak, her voice trembling. Yes, she remembered. Claire was always around, always offering help, bringing food, being the helpful friend. And yes, Julia had started to feel progressively worse. Constant headaches, extreme fatigue, digestive issues that no doctor could diagnose. The doctors thought it was stress, the anxiety of married life. But Julia began to suspect it was something more. When she decided to leave Ethan, it wasn't just because she was tired of the social life. It was because she realized she only felt well when she was away from that house, away from everything that life entailed. You think she was poisoning me? Julia's voice sounded incredulous. We have strong evidence that she was, Ethan replied, and she's trying to do the same thing to Chloe. Julia, I need you to think. Did you keep anything from that time? Any object, any food she gave you, that you didn't consume? Julia thought for a moment. There was a box of special teas Claire gave me shortly before I left. She said they were to help with anxiety. I never opened it. It's been stored in my apartment ever since. Ethan looked at Chloe with hope. Can we borrow it? For analysis? Julia agreed immediately. Anything to help expose that woman for what she is. Ethan, I'm so sorry I didn't have the courage to talk about this sooner. I thought I'd sound crazy, that no one would believe me. I understand, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. And I'm sorry I didn't realize what was happening to you, for not protecting you. After ending the call, Ethan and Chloe sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they were discovering. It wasn't just about the two of them. It was about all the women Claire had destroyed over the years, all the lives she had devastated in her obsessive quest for power and social standing. Chloe picked up her phone and called Vera, updating her on everything. Vera promised to expedite the analysis, and start compiling a complete dossier. She also suggested that Chloe and Ethan record any future interactions with Claire to document everything in a way that could be used legally. For the next 2 days, while Ethan recovered in the hospital, Chloe returned to the townhouse, determined to gather as much evidence as possible. With the help of Rachel, who now visited the house regularly under the pretext of helping her pregnant sister-in-law, they reviewed hours of security camera footage, and that's where they found something crucial. The footage showed Claire entering the kitchen on the afternoon before Ethan's poisoning. She was alone, looking around to make sure no one saw her, and then she took a small vial from her purse. With precise, quick movements, she squeezed a few drops of its contents onto the pie that was already on the counter. Then she put the vial away, arranged the plate carefully, placed the affectionate note, and left the kitchen with that smile she always wore. Chloe felt a mix of nausea and triumph as she watched the footage. It was the visual proof they needed. Claire, in her arrogance, had never imagined she would be filmed. She felt so safe, so untouchable, that she had made the mistake of underestimating technology and the determination of her victims. They copied the recording, saved it on multiple devices, and sent a copy to Vera. They also retrieved the mug Rachel had brought and the box of teas Julia had sent. Everything was forwarded for lab analysis. While they waited for the results, Chloe and Rachel began to dig deeper into Claire's life. They discovered she didn't just live in the property's guest house. She had an apartment in the name of a shell company in Brooklyn. And it was in that apartment that they found more evidence. With the help of one of Vera's contacts who managed to secure a discreet search warrant, they gained access to the place while Claire was out. The apartment was small but well decorated, with expensive furniture and art on the walls. But it wasn't the decor that interested them. In the bathroom cabinet, they found a collection of vials with various substances. Some had pharmacy labels, but others were clearly homemade concoctions. There were also notebooks with detailed notes on dosages, side effects, and methods of administration that wouldn't leave obvious traces. Chloe photographed everything before they left. Those notebooks were like a diary of crimes, a meticulous record of years of calculated poisonings. Claire documented her victims, the symptoms they presented, the adjustments she made to the dosages. It was disturbing, and at the same time, the definitive proof of her guilt. When Ethan was discharged from the hospital 3 days after the incident, he returned home a different man. He was no longer the confident businessman who blindly trusted people. He was someone who had come face to face with the dark side of human nature and realized how he had been manipulated. The first thing he did was lock the guest house and inform Claire via text that she needed to find another place to live, that the situation was no longer convenient. Claire's response was swift and dramatic. She appeared at the townhouse door that same day, her eyes red as if she had been crying for hours, claiming she didn't understand what she had done wrong, that she had always been loyal to the family. Ethan met her in the living room, with Chloe by his side, and for the first time since they had known each other, he maintained a cold distance. "Claire, you need to leave the property, and you need to stop coming to this house." Claire looked from Ethan to Chloe, her confused expression giving way to something harder. "It's because of her, isn't it? She turned you against me. Ethan, I've known you for years. I've been by your side through the worst times, and now you're going to cast me aside like this, because of a woman who barely knows you." Chloe said nothing, just watched. She wanted to see how far Claire would go, how much she would reveal in her attempt to defend herself. "This isn't about Chloe," Ethan said, his voice firm. "It's about you, about the things I've been discovering, about the pattern of behavior that has been repeating for years." Claire laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "What pattern? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about poisoning, Claire. I'm talking about women who mysteriously fell ill whenever you were around. I'm talking about destroyed marriages, lost pregnancies, ruined lives. And I'm talking about the pie you left for me that almost killed me." Claire's face went pale, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're insane. I would never do something like that. This accusation is absurd." "We have the security footage, Claire," Chloe said, finally breaking her silence. "We have you entering the kitchen, taking a vial from your purse and putting something in the pie. We have the lab results showing toxic substances in the food you prepared. We have testimonies from other women who were your victims. We have your apartment full of vials and notebooks documenting everything." Claire took a step back, her mask of sweetness finally crumbling. Her eyes, once so gentle, now gleamed with anger and desperation. "You have nothing. You can't prove anything. Those were illegal searches, baseless accusations. No judge will accept that." Chloe took a step forward. "I'm a federal agent, Claire. I know exactly what constitutes legal evidence. And yes, we have enough, not just to sue you civilly, but to open a formal criminal investigation. And when the press finds out who you really are, when the society you so desperately want to be a part of rejects you, you'll have nowhere left to hide." Claire looked from one to the other, realizing she had lost. Her expression shifted from anger to something more dangerous, a calculated coldness. "You'll regret this. You'll regret messing with me." "Is that a threat?" Ethan asked, recording everything on his phone, something Claire only noticed at that moment. She saw the phone, her face turning even paler. She understood she had made another mistake. She turned and walked out of the house without another word, her heels echoing on the marble floor until the door closed behind her. Chloe and Ethan stood in the living room for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then, Ethan pulled his wife into a tight hug. "It's over," he whispered. "She won't hurt us anymore." But Chloe knew it wasn't over yet. The confrontation was just the beginning. Now came the hardest part, ensuring that Claire paid for everything she had done and could never do it to anyone else again. And for that, they would need a very well-executed plan, a final blow that would expose Claire publicly in a way she could never recover from. And Chloe already knew exactly how to do it. The new year was approaching, and New York City was buzzing with that characteristic late December energy. The streets were decorated with holiday lights, the stores were packed with last-minute shoppers, and the city's elite were preparing for the traditional New Year's Eve parties that would usher in a new year. One of these parties was the annual charity gala hosted by the Vanderbilt family, a grand reception that brought together business leaders, politicians, artists, and influential figures. It was the kind of party that made the society pages, where every detail was meticulously planned to impress. Claire had always been involved in organizing these events. She was the one who suggested vendors, chose the decor, and coordinated the catering. But this year would be different. This year, Ethan and Chloe took full control of the planning, and Claire wasn't even invited to help. The message was clear. She was no longer part of that circle. However, what Claire didn't know was that she would, in fact, be at the party. Just not in the way she imagined. Chloe spent the following weeks working tirelessly with Vera to build the perfect case. The lab results came back, confirming the presence of toxic substances in all the tested items: the cranberry sauce, the pie that poisoned Ethan, the tea Rachel had saved for years, and the box that had belonged to Julia. The vials found in Claire's apartment were analyzed and contained a variety of compounds that, when administered in small doses over time, caused the exact symptoms reported by the victims. The notebooks meticulously documented each administration, each reaction, as if Claire were conducting scientific experiments on human beings. With all this material, Chloe managed to get the FBI to open an official investigation. It wouldn't be easy to build a criminal case that would result in a conviction, as slow, non-lethal poisoning was a gray area in the law. But there were other avenues: civil lawsuits for emotional and physical damages, restraining orders, and, most importantly, the public. Exposure that would completely destroy Claire's reputation in the society she had so longed to conquer. Chloe's strategy was bold. They would invite Claire to the New Year's Eve party, making her believe that Ethan had reconsidered, that there was still a place for her in the family. It would be Claire's ego and arrogance that would lead her straight into the trap. During the party, with all the guests present and the press covering the event, Chloe would publicly present the evidence, with the support of federal agents who would be undercover among the guests. Ethan hesitated when Chloe proposed the plan. Wouldn't it be too traumatic? Wouldn't it be better to just sue Claire quietly and let the justice system run its course? But Chloe was firm. If we do this discreetly, she'll find a way to reinvent herself, to move to another city, to keep doing the same thing to other people. We need to expose her so publicly that she can never hide again. We need all her future victims to know who she is before she even tries to get close. Rachel fully supported Chloe. She wanted justice not just for herself but for all the women Claire had destroyed. Julia also agreed to attend the party and tell her story. Even some of the victims from other cities, contacted by Vera during the investigation, agreed to send video testimonials. The bait was set a week before the party. Ethan called Claire, his voice filled with false regret. He said he had thought a lot, that maybe he had been unfair, that Chloe was going through a difficult time with the pregnancy and it had affected his judgment. He said he missed Claire's friendship and wanted her to be at the end-of-year party as she always had been. Claire hesitated for a moment, suspicious, but the desire to regain her position spoke louder. She accepted the invitation. The night of December 31st arrived with a clear, starry sky. The Vanderbilt townhouse was stunning, illuminated by thousands of white lights decorating the gardens. An orchestra played classical music in the main ballroom, where elegantly set tables awaited the guests. French champagne flowed freely, and New York's elite paraded in their finest gowns and tuxedos. Chloe was radiant in a long gold satin dress that perfectly accommodated her 8-month belly. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore only a pearl necklace Ethan had given her for their anniversary. Despite her anxiety about what was to come, she remained serene, chatting with guests, greeting people, playing the part of the perfect hostess. Claire arrived promptly at 9 o'clock. She wore a daring red dress, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. She carried a gift box wrapped in gold paper, which she said was a special keepsake for the baby-to-be. Chloe accepted the gift with a polite smile but didn't open it. She knew exactly what it might contain. For an hour, the party proceeded normally. Claire circulated through the ballroom, greeting acquaintances, chatting with ease, clearly relieved to have been readmitted to that social circle. She even approached Chloe a few times, making kind comments about the pregnancy, asking how she was feeling. Chloe responded cordially but kept her distance. When the clock struck 10, Ethan went up to the small stage that had been set up in the ballroom. He asked for everyone's attention, and gradually the murmur of conversations died down until only the soft music of the orchestra could be heard in the background. "Good evening, everyone," Ethan began, his firm voice echoing through the sound system. "I'd like to thank each of you for being here tonight. As you know, this party has always been a moment of celebration for our family, a time of gratitude for the blessings we've received and hope for the year to come. But tonight, in addition to celebrating, we also want to use this platform to talk about something very serious." Chloe joined her husband on stage, and Claire, who was standing nearby, felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong. Ethan continued. "In recent months, my wife and I have discovered something that has shocked us deeply. We discovered that a person we trusted, someone we considered practically family, was systematically poisoning us, and not just us, but several other people over the years." A murmur of surprise rippled through the ballroom. Claire turned pale, discreetly looking for an exit, but she noticed that 2 men in suits, clearly security agents, were positioned near her. Chloe took the microphone. "My name is Chloe Miller. I'm a federal agent, and I'd like to share with you an investigation we've conducted over the past few months." Behind her, a large screen began to display images. It was the security footage showing Claire tampering with the pie in the kitchen. It was lab documents confirming the presence of toxic substances. It was pages from the notebooks found in her apartment, with detailed notes on dosages and effects. With each image displayed, the guests reacted with growing horror. Chloe narrated each discovery with the precision of an investigator, but also with the emotion of a victim who had almost lost everything. She told them about Thanksgiving dinner, her suspicions, the silent investigation, about how Ethan was poisoned by eating something meant for her, about Rachel, who had lost a baby, about Julia, who was forced to abandon her marriage because of an illness that never existed but was induced. Rachel and Julia went up on stage, both emotional, and shared their own experiences. Then, The screen showed the video testimonials from the other victims in other cities, each one telling how Claire had destroyed their lives. Claire tried to leave the ballroom, but the agents stopped her. She looked around, searching for a friendly face, someone who might believe her. But she found only looks of shock, disgust, and disappointment. The mask she had worn for so many years was completely shattered, exposed under the unforgiving lights of that crowded room. Chloe concluded her presentation with firm words. This woman, Claire Sterling, has used psychological manipulation, slow poisoning, and emotional control to destroy lives for years. She was never caught because she was careful, because she knew exactly how to act without leaving obvious traces. But tonight, with all the evidence gathered, with all the victims finally speaking out, we want to ensure she can never do this to anyone again. Criminal charges are being filed against her. Civil lawsuits from all the victims are being filed. And as of tonight, all of you know exactly who she is. 2 FBI agents, who had been undercover among the guests, approached Claire. They didn't arrest her on the spot, as there was no warrant yet, but they escorted her out for formal questioning. Claire, who had always been so eloquent, so convincing, couldn't say a word. She left the ballroom escorted, under the flashes of photographers' cameras covering the event, her image captured in a moment of complete humiliation. The guests stood in silence for a moment, processing everything they had witnessed. Then slowly they began to applaud. First a timid applause, then growing in intensity until the entire ballroom was on its feet, applauding Chloe, Ethan, Rachel, and Julia. It wasn't just an applause of support, it was an applause of recognition for their courage in exposing such a dark truth, for not being silenced, for fighting for justice, even when everything seemed to be against them. After the party ended, in the early hours of the new year, Chloe and Ethan sat in the townhouse gardens, watching the sky begin to lighten. She rested her head on his shoulder, her hand on her belly where the baby slept peacefully. "It was hard, but it was worth it," Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. "You saved not only us, but you also saved her future victims. What you did was incredible." Chloe sighed. "I didn't do it alone. Rachel, Julia, Vera, they were all essential, and now we need to make sure this leads to real change. I want this case to set a precedent. I want other victims of psychological and slow poisoning to know they can report it, that they can seek justice, and that's exactly what Chloe did in the following months. The case gained national attention. The victims' stories were shared in newspapers, on television shows, and in documentaries. Claire was sued civilly by all the victims and lost every case, forced to pay substantial damages. Criminally, although a conviction for non-lethal poisoning was complex, she was convicted of other related crimes: fraud, breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit acts that endangered lives. But the greatest punishment Claire received was social. Her name became synonymous with manipulation and danger. She was completely ostracized from New York society. She lost all her consulting contracts, all her contacts, all the doors that had once opened so easily for her. She tried to move to other cities, even other countries, but the internet doesn't forget. Wherever she went, someone recognized her name, and her story preceded her. Chloe gave birth to a healthy baby boy in February, a beautiful baby they named Ryan. Holding her son in her arms after everything she had been through to protect him was one of the most emotional moments of her life. Ethan was by her side, equally moved, promising he would do everything to be the best father possible. The following months, Chloe made an important decision. She wouldn't return to the Upper East Side townhouse. That place held too many memories, many of them painful. She and Ethan rented a spacious apartment in Soho, a place that would be just theirs, with no ghosts of the past. Ethan fully supported the decision. He also needed a fresh start, a space where they could build their own traditions and memories as a family. As for their relationship, there was a lot of work to be done. The trust that had been broken had to be rebuilt piece by piece. They went to couples therapy, had long conversations about past mistakes, about how they could prevent something like this from happening again. Ethan learned to listen more, to trust Chloe's instincts more, and Chloe learned to express her concerns in ways Ethan could understand, without bottling everything up until it was too late. 6 months after Ryan's birth, Chloe returned to work, but in a different role. She proposed a special project to her superiors at the FBI, a division dedicated to investigating crimes of non-lethal poisoning and domestic psychological violence. It was a type of crime that rarely resulted in serious investigations because the symptoms were diffuse, the evidence was complicated to collect, and the victims were often discredited. But Chloe knew from her own experience how real and devastating this type of violence was. The project was approved, and Chloe became the team leader. They developed protocols for identifying this type of crime, trained healthcare professionals to recognize the signs, and created partnerships with labs for more accessible analyses. The first case Chloe personally handled was an anonymous tip involving a nanny and a child with persistent symptoms that no doctor could explain. Chloe arrived at the family's home, observed the scene, talked to the parents, and examined the child's medical records. And there, using everything she had learned from her own experience, she was able to identify the pattern. She collected samples, ran analyses, and discovered that the nanny was administering small doses of substances that made the child just sick enough for the woman to seem indispensable to the parents, creating an emotional dependency. It was a perverse way to secure her job and the attention she craved. The nanny was immediately removed, prosecuted, and the child began to recover. The grateful parents could hardly believe something like that could happen in their own home. Chloe explained that it was more common than people imagined, that emotional predators existed in all spheres of society, using subtle tactics to control and manipulate. Months passed, and Chloe's life found a new rhythm. She divided her time between her work at the FBI's Special Division and caring for Ryan, who was growing up healthy and full of energy. Ethan became a dedicated father, involved in every stage of his son's development, from sleepless nights to first steps and first words. Rachel and Mark, inspired by Chloe's courage, also decided to start over. They began to consider having children again, this time with all the emotional and medical support they needed. And when Rachel announced a new pregnancy, about a year after Claire's exposure, the whole family celebrated with tears of joy. This time there would be no one to threaten that new life. Julia also found peace. She remarried to a man who respected and supported her, and finally managed to leave the traumas of her first marriage behind. She and Chloe became friends, united by their shared experience and the certainty that they had survived something that could have destroyed them. One sunny afternoon in September, Chloe was in her office at the FBI when she received an envelope with no return address. Inside, there was only a handwritten letter. It was from a woman who didn't identify herself, saying she had seen Chloe's story on television and that it had encouraged her to report her own situation. She was being poisoned by her partner, but didn't know how to prove it. She was asking for help. Chloe read the letter several times, tears blurring her vision. This was what it had all been for. It wasn't just about her own justice. It was about creating a path for other women, other victims, to know they weren't alone, that they could fight, that they could win. She picked up the phone and called her team. "We have a new case." And so, life went on, with its scars, its lessons, its victories. Chloe had faced the worst kind of betrayal and survived. She had turned her pain into purpose, her anger into action, her fear into courage. And now, with her son in her arms and a future ahead of her, she knew that every challenge, every sleepless night, every moment of terror had been worth it. Because in the end, she wasn't just a survivor, she was a warrior. And warriors don't give up. They fight, they protect, and they win. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Chloe and her fight against Claire has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative shows us that one woman's courage can transform not only her own life, but also the lives of so many others who suffer in silence. If you were moved by Chloe's strength, by the unity of Rachel and Julia, and by Ethan's awakening to the truth, please leave a like right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the intense stories we bring you, stories that reveal the deepest, most courageous, and resilient side of the human soul. And in the comments, we want to know, what stood out to you most in Chloe's journey? Was it the discovery of the poisoning? The courage to investigate alone? The public exposure of Claire? Or the transformation she brought about by creating a project to help other victims? Let us know. Your opinion is very important and enriches our community. Every day, we bring stories like this that move you, make you think, and show the strength of the human spirit in the face of the darkest adversities. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the complexity of life. Until then, and thank you for being with us on this journey.